Apocalypse and Now Redux by Francis Ford Coppola, a film review by Ciro Discepolo. As all fictional journeys, also the one of Captain Willard, Martin Sheen, on a special mission from Saigon to a military base on the border with Cambodia, metaphorically suggests another. He was ordered to go up the Mekong in enemy territory to an outpost controlled by Colonel Kurtz, a superb Marlon Brando who had apparently gone mad and is fighting a war of his own. The big metallic barge of Captain Willard, green beret like Kurtz and killer of the army, goes up along a dirty and stinky river that moves like a poisonous snake into the bowels of a jungle/hell, always hot and humid, almost always beaten by very violent and endless rains, covered with unhealthy miasmas that are confused with the fog, with the ever-present gases, with the pungent smoke of the American bombs, with the remains of the napalm, a smog that continuously changes color, but that veers almost always towards blood red. The analogy is as powerful as quite obvious to trace. The track of the United States of America in that great tragedy that was for the Vietnamese and for the Americans a disaster of a whole epoch, of generations that came out of it mutilated in the flesh, but most of all in the spirit. Vietnam was probably one of the greatest errors in the entire history of the United States, an error that cost the life of a president who wanted to stop it, and to his senator brother, who wished to follow his footsteps. From the point of view of cinematographic representation, Francis Ford Coppola filmed probably the most extraordinary 10 minutes or so in the movie history. This is also the topic scene of the movie. The fanatic Colonel Kilgore, Robert Duvall, is preparing with his 9th Chivalry heavy bombing helicopters to attack a Vietnamese village. It is a few minutes before the sunrise, and he's about to order the swarm of helicopters to appear to the Vietnamese from the same direction of the rising sun. In the village, shrouded in a silent calm, many kids, women, and old people are visible. The trumpeter sounds the charge in the same way that we saw many times in John Wayne's movies. Colonel Kilgore is in a hurry, because soon after quickly settling this matter, he is awaited for his daily morning surfing. The dark gray steel birds take off in attack formation, and the commandant orders to play The Ride of the Valkyries by Richard Wagner very loud, because he thinks Charlie, thus all the U.S. Army called the Viet Cong, will be scared to death when he hears these notes. A few minutes of death and of total destruction follow, a frightening massacre in which the DTS uncompressed sound of the 2001 remastered version, and now finally in Blu-ray, hits you directly in your stomach, together with the screams of children, the low-frequency rumble of the bombs that explode everywhere, the hiss of light and heavy machine guns in a scene that, as I was saying, is horrible for what it represents, but it is, at the same time, one of the highest moments in the history of cinema of all times and of all countries. By radio, Colonel Kilgore orders some fighters to drop a lot of napalm very close to the village, where there is an enemy mortar hidden in the bush. The scene is like Apocalypse indeed. Actually, all the movie seems to be the scenario of Dante's Hell. It is important to remember at this point, on a strictly technical level, that these Blu-ray operations, where the most precious part of the movie is exactly the uncompressed sound that takes the greatest part of the 25 gigabytes available on the support, are only for the original version with subtitles in languages different from English. The film goes on along this similar hell circle without end until the boat of the protagonist as if it were driven by a gigantic and poisonous Tenia, that is the river, but also Vietnam in the American's vision, finally arrives to its destination. You have to note that in all the feature film we never see a single Viet Cong. Here we find a Colonel Kurtz that is probably demented and who lives surrounded from many primitives, decimated by malaria and by the more and more numerous death executions wanted from himself for the most incredible reasons. He lives like a god among savages, with no military uniforms, surrounded from a Bible and other holy books of different religions. He meets Captain Willard knowing that he will be his killer. He speaks to him for a long time about war, about the horrors that he saw, about the horrors that also him wanted and ordered. It is his own spiritual delirium. He orders to torture his captive. Later he releases him and remains to wait for the death that is arriving. As all the Godfather's massacres, contemporarily to sacral rites that are happening in that moment, in the village in this case, Colonel Kurtz will be defeated by machete blows, just like the beef that the indigenous are sacrificing a few meters from there. Then the Captain Killer of the Special Services abandons the place, followed by the gaze of the presence, who recognize the new god in him. The end is different from the first edition of the movie made in 1970. I have read on the internet that some scenes have been added like the one of the Playmates original that prostitute themselves into a shattered helicopter for scatterbrained and insane American soldiers. Apparently there were also added some scenes of the meeting with the proud and wealthy French colonists that did not want to abandon the location. But my memory is strong and sizing, and I remember it still by still. However, the entire movie is longer in the new Blu-ray version and reaches the duration of 3 hours and 22 minutes, we absolutely have to mark the excellent photography of Vittorio Storaro and the intelligent use of music, some Success USA pieces of those years, in some topic moments of the story. Francis Ford Coppola was born in Detroit, Michigan, on April 7, 1939, at 1:38 a.m. In his natal chart, the presence of Venus and Jupiter in the second house, the great cinematographic success, and Mars dominant, close to the Capricorn ascendant, are very important. This film, and the fantastic saga of The Godfather, expresses a very high tentative surely reached to explain by Capricorn coldness the absurdity of violence and of evil in all the appearances in which they present themselves.